Hi, Matt Sinclair. Apple has announced its Vision Pro, what it sees as the future, what it calls spatial computing. It's an interesting device, and I think we can speculate a little about how it might evolve over time based on prior experience. So, just to start out with, it looks very, very cool. This is a still from the video that they released to accompany the launch. Ben Thompson, in his Stratechery newsletter, has tried one. It sounds like it delivers on a lot of what people want from VR and AR. Genuinely immersive, smooth, usable, able to capture gestures in a way he at least found easy. I think the fact it's coming sort of early next year in the US, who knows when in the rest of the world, but presumably not far behind, is exciting, right? It's a sign of what the modern technology ecosystem can deliver. Um, and so I think it's going to come in as this initial device from Apple. I think it's interesting to speculate on how it will develop over time, both in terms of how it's used and what it costs. So one interesting challenge he draws out is that it seems like it's intended for quite isolated experiences, and in some cases, it comes across as a good thing. So, allowing you to get away from the noise of a plane, for example. In other cases, so when there was a father hanging out with his kids in the video. I think a couple of people have said it felt like a bit of an off note, and it's something people have talked about with VR already, that it's an experience that kind of cuts you off from the world in a certain way. It should be less true for a VR AR kind of hybrid like this one. Now, I do think that we should put a bit of a caveat on that. I'm not entirely convinced by this concern because it feels like, firstly, as he says, in the sort of the extract I've put up here, this is normally where you'd start. Any experience that's built around a social engagement, necessarily you've got this problem of, well, only so many people are going to have these devices at the start. It limits the usage. This thing needs to be compelling. If you go and get one, it will be a compelling experience. Hopefully, over time, there's enough people using them that it then enables more social experiences. And I think it's important to remember that Apple might not be the one that figures out those social experiences. If you think about your mobile phone, the social apps you use are largely not made by Apple. Some of them are, iMessage, for example. Not all, not most, probably. So the social app you use on your Apple Vision Pro or some successor or competitor might be Facebook or Instagram from Meta. It might be LinkedIn, it might be Fortnite. Obviously, Meta is working on its own lines of devices and surely would prefer for them to win out or at least be part of a kind of competitive ecosystem of these devices. But there's no reason at this stage to rule out a world that looks kind of like the one we have now, where Meta can deliver that social element on someone else, on a device that someone else has made. I think that's why, he's making an interesting point here, but we do need to remember that the outcome here will not be that one side wins and owns AR VR. It will be different contributions to that ecosystem, and the question will be, to what extent does Apple's vision of the world shape that, or to what extent does it kind of create more of a technological blank canvas that all kinds of app developers will write upon. I think the other interesting point a lot of people have commented on is the price. It's obviously pretty eye-watering and beyond what a lot of people have to spend on devices. I think there's some interesting context though if we look back at what happened with the iPhone. So this chart from Horace Dediu, I'll try to include a link. As far as I'm aware, this is reasonably accurate, kind of how I remember it evolving over time. And a lot of the other data I've seen doesn't show the same dispersal. I think what I like about this graph is it shows the range of iPhone price points over time and how that has grown. Of course, the fact this has happened with the iPhone does not mean it will happen with Apple Vision Pro, but for a lot of purposes. So if you think, for example, of the work on the economic impact of the metaverse for Meta that Analysis Mason has done, The smartphone experience is where people are starting, perhaps not in terms of the massive user numbers of smartphones, but in terms of thinking through how this new market might play out. And you can see in this graph that the iPhone quickly establishes a budget option, which is cheaper than when the product first launched, quite a lot cheaper. So when Steve Ballmer from Microsoft famously could criticize the iPhone as too expensive, he wasn't entirely wrong. It gets a price cut pretty fast. It's then also steadily offered more premium options. So as the phone becomes a bigger and bigger part of our lives, we're diluting the cost of that phone over more usage, which is why I think there is a kind of a rationale behind us spending more on these phones. You know, we do more with them, and so a better experience is being delivered over a wider range of activities. And you can easily imagine the same pattern happening again in AR, VR. So if that same pattern prevails, what would it cost over time? So first, you could imagine that cheap version. And they're already, I think, setting it up with the name, right? If there's a Pro in Apple's lineup, there's normally a regular model. If that's about half the price, it'll be about the price of a nice laptop, a basic MacBook Pro. It would also be at the top end of the iPhone price range, kind of handoff from Apple's phones to its laptops. You could, over time, imagine a top-end version, going as high as $7,000, doubling from the current announced price. And it's important to remember that would put it at about the same price as a new Mac Pro. So none of this means it'll be cheap. I don't want to diminish that we're talking about expensive premium devices, which is, really the market Apple tends to mostly sell into. And if this is going to become a mass market, it's going to need to be complemented by other providers selling at a lower price point. It might even be a question of thinking about a richer second-hand market than has often existed for mobile phones, at least in developed economies. But computers do cost a lot, and people do pay that price these days because of the role these devices have in our lives. So obviously we'll see. It's early days yet, but I think we're starting perhaps to get a bit more clarity on how the early days of AR VR are going to look as a practical platform. You can, if you have the money, buy in a shop. I hope you found that interesting. If you have any thoughts, please drop them down in the comments below. Any questions, and please do like and subscribe. And I'll speak to you next time.